6 years ago, a climber disappeared on the Matterhorn, searching for an unexplored area with geological secrets. During the expedition, the mountain's unpredictable conditions swallowed him up without a trace. The pain of uncertainty plagued his family until, years later, drones found traces under the ice, reigniting the mystery and the hope for answers. If you're curious to know how this story unfolded, then like and subscribe to the channel and stay with me. The disappearance of the Matterhorn climber deeply shook his wife and his closest friend. The pain of loss was overwhelming, but what consumed them most was the lack of clear answers. Looking up at the mountain, his wife saw not just a landscape of sadness, but an unforgiving terrain that hid what remained of her beloved. Each day without answers, without knowing whether he was alive or not, was torture. As if the mountain had taken not only his body, but also his soul. The anguish of not knowing what happened and being forced to live with the silence of the mystery consumed her. The search for an answer became her sole obsession. His friend, who had been by his side since the beginning of the expedition, couldn't escape the guilt. He tried to understand where he had failed, if he could have done more. As time passed, he found himself constantly reliving their last conversation, their last words. Could he have done something differently? This question haunted him in every waking moment, in every memory. The pain of losing someone so close mixed with a sense of helplessness. He felt as if he were abandoning his friend at his most critical moment, and this pain was impossible to ignore. But the worst part wasn't just the pain of loss. It was the uncertainty. The mountain, with its immensity of ice and rock, continued to silence all attempts at answers. Expeditions using cutting-edge equipment failed to find any trace that could explain the disappearance. The theory of an accident, the hypothesis of human error, all clashed with the fact that, despite all the effort, no concrete conclusion could be reached. But the mystery didn't end there. Conspiracy theories began to emerge, with some suggesting that the climber might have discovered something so shocking that his journey was abruptly cut short. Perhaps the disappearance was more than an accident. Perhaps it was a secret the Matterhorn was determined to keep. And that's when the pain of not knowing what happened transformed into something more, a constant doubt about what the mountain still held in store. As the years passed, family members and the climbing community continued to wonder, what happened to the climber? Could he have survived? Could the mountain have become his tomb, but also his prison? This uncertainty was not only an emotional void, but a constant pressure, a burden that grew as the mystery deepened. And as search efforts intensified, the answer seemed more distant than ever, as if the mountain had swallowed the truth once and for all. After 6 long years of mystery and speculation, a new expedition was launched to the Matterhorn. But no, one imagined that this time things would be different. Using drones, sensors, and high-definition cameras, investigators were about to make a discovery that would change everything. As the ice began to melt, a surprise surfaced. Traces of equipment, a partial structure, something clearly related to the climber's disappearance. How could these objects have remained there, hidden under the ice for so long? This was a sign that the climber hadn't been swallowed by the mountain as everyone thought. He might have survived much longer than anyone imagined. Soon, theories began to shift. Previously, everyone believed the climber had quickly succumbed to the unforgiving terrain. But now, with this shocking discovery, new possibilities emerged. What seemed like a simple disappearance turned into a clue to survival. How could he have continued his journey for so long? What else was hidden beneath that ice? Questions began to pile up, and worst of all, each new answer brought more mystery. The idea that he might have found something crucial before disappearing began to take shape. Could the climber have made a discovery no one was prepared to understand? The discovery of the equipment and the partial structure wasn't just a clue. It was a gateway to a new investigation. As experts analyzed the images and data, a more intriguing theory began to emerge. The climber had not only survived longer than previously thought, but had also found something so significant that his survival might have been a secret the mountain refused to reveal. With each new clue, the mountain seemed to hold even more secrets. The traces found weren't just proof that the climber had fought for survival, but also indicated that he was close to something bigger, something he may never have had the chance to fully understand. And while everyone wondered what he could have found, the ice slowly melted, revealing more pieces of the puzzle. Satellite and aerial images not only showed where the remains were, but also revealed details about the terrain that had previously been invisible. The storms, the rapid and unpredictable changes of the mountain, which had previously seemed insurmountable. Barriers were now seen as clues, as signs that the climber had faced extreme conditions with a resilience no one had imagined. What had seemed like a tragic accident now became a much greater mystery. And with each new piece of information, the end of the story seemed further away. The climber's wife and friends, who had lived with the pain of uncertainty for years, didn't know how to deal with these new revelations. Renewed hope brought a new emotional toll. What if he had actually survived longer? What if he had found something vital, something that explained his struggle against the mountain's relentless forces? They were finally getting closer to an answer, but the big question remained. What really happened there on the Matterhorn? The clues were all there, waiting to be discovered, but one truth still seemed to elude them, hidden beneath layers of ice and time. Now the search was no longer just for answers about the climber, but for a secret buried for years in the heart of the mountain. What had he found? What happened on that mountain to cause him to be swallowed up by nature without a trace? And most importantly, what did the mountain still hold that could change everything? The twist was just beginning, and the end of this story was still far from being reached. The discovery of remains beneath the ice on the Matterhorn was a milestone in the investigation into the climber's disappearance. For 6 years, theories about what had happened on that fateful day had been mounting, but none seemed satisfactory. When drones revealed the first signs of equipment and a partial structure, hope was renewed, but new questions also arose. The idea that the climber might have survived longer than previously thought turned the investigation on its head, shifting the search from just for answers about his fate to a possible secret buried deep within the mountain. With the discovery, a new expedition was organized, this time utilizing cutting-edge technology. State-of-the-art drones, high-definition cameras, and thermal sensors were used to precisely explore the area where the remains were found. The team of experts knew the task would be arduous, as the mountain conditions were unforgiving and the terrain treacherous. However, there was a sense of urgency, as if the mountain were finally ready to reveal its answers. The team, comprised of experienced climbers, geologists, meteorologists, and mountaineering historians, knew this was their only chance to discover what really happened. Every step they took on the mountain felt like an invitation to unravel a mystery that had challenged them for so long. The first task was to understand the extreme conditions the climber was in when he disappeared. To this end, experts began analyzing contemporary meteorological data and studying the terrain. The Matterhorn, with its sharp peak and steep slopes, was known for its unpredictable weather. Snowstorms, strong winds, and freezing temperatures are common in the region, and the area where the climber disappeared was one of the most dangerous. The mountain's rocky and unstable terrain made any movement extremely risky, and the fact that the climber was attempting to reach a less explored peak only compounded the difficulties. With each new discovery about the climatic and geographic conditions, the investigation team began to better understand the hostile environment the climber faced. Meanwhile, drone footage began to reveal new details. By observing the remains found beneath the ice, experts began to piece together the puzzle. What had previously appeared to be a simple collection of abandoned equipment now took on new meaning. The climber had left behind a collection of organized items, as if he had been trying to survive longer than initial reports suggested. A backpack with some survival gear, ropes, and a pair of boots were visible in the area, but what caught the most attention was a makeshift structure made of rocks and ice. It appeared the climber had attempted to build a shelter to protect himself from the elements. But what was even more striking was the fact that the structure was in an extremely difficult-to-reach area. How had he managed to get there? And more importantly, how had he managed to survive without outside help? Analysis of the tracks revealed that the climber seemed to have accomplished the impossible. He was adapting to the environment in a surprising way. Using his experience and climbing skills, he had created a makeshift shelter, likely to protect himself from the sudden storms and biting winds common in the region. His use of ropes and other climbing equipment indicated he was trying to reach a safer point, but the terrain seemed to be conspiring against him. The idea that he had survived longer than anyone had imagined became increasingly plausible. Perhaps he had found a way to protect himself and withstand the brutality of the environment in ways no one had anticipated. At the same time, the team began reviewing accounts from witnesses and survivors of other expeditions that had taken place in the region in the years following the disappearance. Some climbers reported sensing a strange presence in the area, as if someone had tried to take shelter nearby, but no one had ever found any trace. Stories of encounters with wild animals and attempts to survive the elements began to intertwine, creating an even more complex narrative. Witnesses who had climbed the mountain after the climber's disappearance reported a sense of mystery in the area, as if the mountain itself were harboring a secret. This mystery only intensified as more and more details were uncovered. The crux of the investigation was the discovery that the climber might have done something far more significant before disappearing. The idea that he had found something vital, something that could have changed the mountain's history or even his own survival, began to gain traction. Experts began to investigate whether he might have made a geological discovery or whether he was about to reveal something related to the formation of the terrain or the dynamics of ice and rock layers. Some believed he might have found a significant geological fault that could reveal new secrets about the mountain, while others speculated about the possibility of a more sensational discovery, involving ancient artifacts or even an unknown natural phenomenon. These hypotheses began to dominate discussions among investigators, and everyone involved knew they were approaching something big. But exactly what that something was still shrouded in mystery. The most recent data on the area, obtained through satellite and drone imagery, indicated that the terrain had changed dramatically over the years. Analysis showed that some areas of the mountain had been shaped by previously unobserved geological events. These changes could have affected the climber's path, making his survival even more difficult. The mountain, already unforgiving, seemed to have become even more treacherous, as if altered by something deeper than anyone could comprehend. With each new discovery, anticipation about what really happened to the climber grew, and investigators began to believe they were closer to the truth than ever. As more and more clues were uncovered, new questions arose about the true reason the climber had disappeared. If he had found something so significant, something that could have changed the way we understand the mountain's geology, what had been his intention? Was he trying to make a historic discovery? Or was there something more personal at play, something that drove him to remain on the mountain, even when all signs indicated that the fight for survival was in vain? What lay hidden beneath the mountain's ice was a question that now became central to the investigation, and answers seemed more distant than ever. But one thing was clear: the mountain's secret was yet to be revealed, and the climber somehow still held the keys to that mystery. As technological advances brought new clues and unearthed crucial evidence about the Matterhorn climber's disappearance, other key figures began to emerge. Each contributed valuable information, but also cast doubt on the previously accepted narrative. These new accounts, far from bringing quick conclusions, intensified the mystery, fueling conflicting theories and making the truth increasingly elusive. One of the first to be consulted was Klaus, a veteran climber who had climbed the Matterhorn several times before the disappearance. His testimony was both disturbing and thought-provoking.
Klaus described the mountain as treacherous terrain, where any reckless movement could lead to death. He recounted, in vivid detail, a previous attempt to climb the area near the peak where the climber disappeared. It was an extremely difficult
area, even for the most experienced, Klaus said, emphasizing the unpredictability of the terrain and the sudden storms that frequently changed direction. I was there. It was a constant battle with the weather and the terrain, and sometimes you just can't predict what's going to happen. He speculated that the climber had become lost in one of these treacherous crevasses, unable to return, and that his death had been swift and silent. However, his version of events did not align with the new findings. How could he have become lost in a crevasse, yet still left traces of his presence, such as the makeshift structure beneath the ice? Klaus, for all his experience, seemed to cling to a simplistic version of what happened, but the new evidence pointed to something much more complex. In contrast to Klaus, Mara, a climber who had also been on expeditions in the region, brought a new layer of mystery to the investigation. She knew the missing climber personally and, during an interview, shared something that left everyone perplexed. He was obsessed with something before he went on that expedition. He talked about a discovery, something he believed could change the way we look at the Matterhorn. According to Mara, the climber wasn't just after the glory of reaching another challenging peak. He was searching for something. But what was this discovery he kept so secret? He never spoke openly about it, but I knew it wasn't just a personal desire to conquer the mountain. He was convinced there was something bigger, something no one else had found before, Mara said, with a look of regret. Her words echoed in everyone's minds, raising the hypothesis that the climber might have made a crucial discovery, something he believed could change the understanding of the region's geology or even the history of the mountains. This account was quickly analyzed by investigators who began to ponder what the climber might have found. With the new clue that he might have made a scientific or geological discovery before disappearing, theories began to multiply. Some speculated that he had found a major geological fault, a fissure in the layers of rock and ice that could have altered our entire understanding of the mountain's behavior. Others suggested he might have found traces of a rare mineral formation, which had not yet been catalogued but could be revolutionary for science. The discovery of an improvised structure made of stones and rocks reinforced the idea that the climber was trying to protect himself or perhaps survive longer, indicating that he was far more aware of his surroundings than initially thought. The possibility that he had risked himself in search of something so large only added to the enigma. However, the idea that the climber might have discovered something he didn't want soon raised another line of suspicion. the involvement of others. Some members of the climbing community began to hypothesize that the climber might have been the victim of a conspiracy. A bolder theory suggested that someone with a vested interest in keeping secrets about the mountain or even a scientific discovery had influenced the climber's disappearance, possibly forcing him to disappear to ensure the secret wouldn't be revealed. There was no solid evidence to support this hypothesis, but the silence surrounding some expeditions in the region in the days and weeks following the climber's disappearance gained some credence, especially among those who had already suspected the mysterious nature of the expedition. Furthermore, one of the most intriguing clues came from other climbers who had climbed the Matterhorn shortly after the climber's disappearance. Reports indicated that in certain areas of the mountain, it was common to find signs of wild animals, perhaps a lynx or even a bear, which appeared to have left marks on the rocks near the remains found under the ice. This raised new speculation. Could the climber, after surviving for so long, have been attacked by one of these animals? Some members of the expedition who were directly involved in the more recent searches began to question whether the climber had been able to withstand the elements, but not the wildness of the mountain, which by its very nature presents so many dangers. As the investigation progressed, the case became more convoluted. Theories continued to pile up, with no clear answer in sight. The climbing community, now divided between those who believed the climber had succumbed to the relentless forces of nature and those who believed he had made a discovery worth paying for with his life, was more engaged than ever. Each new testimony and each new piece of the puzzle seemed to open more doors, but also created new questions. Now, the mountain was not just a symbol of mystery, but a battleground for theories about what had really happened there. Researchers were getting closer to the truth, but the answer was far from clear. The Matterhorn's secret, if it existed, lay buried deep beneath layers of ice and history. And even as they neared an answer, researchers sensed that the true mystery still lay in wait, as if the mountain had decided that the truth would only be revealed at the right time. As the months passed, and as new clues were unearthed, the mystery of the missing Matterhorn climber deepened. What seemed like a simple search for answers began to transform into a complex investigation full of twists and turns. The discovery of the climber's remains beneath the ice raised more questions than answers, and with each new discovery, the hot case seemed to branch off in unexpected directions. As if all this weren't enough, clashes within the investigation team began to intensify tensions. The revelations, which were supposed to bring clarity, ended up revealing a darker and more unpredictable scenario. The first major revelation came in the form of a peculiar geological structure discovered in a previously unexplored area of the Matterhorn, where the climber was last seen. This structure was no simple rock formation. It appeared to have been shaped possibly by human action. Initially, the discovery was met with skepticism, as the idea that the climber had found something related to an ancient civilization or an unusual geological phenomenon seemed unlikely. But as the analysis deepened, scientists began to consider the possibility that the climber was, in fact, searching for something much larger than a simple unexplored peak. He might have found a rare geological formation or even an artifact from another time, something that could have changed the way we understand the mountain and its ice sheets. A dilemma began to emerge within the investigation team itself. Some members believed the climber had made a significant scientific discovery, and his death was perhaps linked to this discovery. They began to theorize that he might have stumbled upon a natural secret or even a geological fault so significant that, if revealed, it could alter the world's understanding of the Matterhorn and its formation. Others, however, questioned this theory. For them, the climber's disappearance was a predictable tragedy, the result of the mountain's relentlessness, and a failure of his expedition. They argued that he had succumbed to the elements, leaving no trace, like so many others before him. The tension between these two views became a significant obstacle, as while some sought scientific answers, others tried to maintain realistic expectations based on simple explanations. But the real turning point came when, during the analysis of images captured by drones and satellites, new evidence was revealed. The images showed an area of the glacier that appeared to have been manipulated in some way, as if someone had left deep marks in the snow, creating a clearly artificial area. An object was identified among the layers of ice and rock. Initially, it appeared to be just a natural anomaly, but upon closer examination, it revealed something with clearly artificial characteristics. The shape, lines, and contours of the object were not consistent with any known geological formation, and experts began to speculate that the climber had found something of great significance. This reopened a heated debate. Had he found a lost civilization, a mysterious artifact, or a geological formation with unimaginable implications? For some investigators, this discovery was key to understanding the climber's disappearance. If he had found something so significant, it could have been the reason for his death or disappearance. The idea that he had made such a major discovery, and that the mountain was somehow trying to keep this secret hidden, seemed increasingly plausible. What if his death hadn't been an accident? What if he had somehow been silenced? With this new line of investigation, the team members began to divide even further. Some believed the climber had found something so extraordinary that his death was a consequence of defying the mountain's power, while others insisted the explanation lay in the natural tragedy of his attempt to climb an unexplored region. Meanwhile, the atmosphere within the investigation team grew increasingly tense. The clash between differing perspectives intensified, and conversations became more heated. Some team members began to suspect that perhaps more people were involved in the watch case than initially thought. Could the climber have found something others didn't want revealed? Some even suggested he might have been forced to disappear, or that his death was orchestrated by outside interests. The fact that he was so obsessed with a possible discovery, and the fact that he had been so secretive about his intentions, further fueled the theory that he had been involved in something larger than a simple mountaineering expedition. What had seemed like a simple search for answers now turned into an investigation rife with speculation, theories, and above all, suspicion. The question of who actually had access to information about the expedition and what interests lay behind the climber's actions was at the center of debate. The idea that his death could have been influenced by a larger plot put everyone on edge. What if he had discovered something someone wanted to keep secret? What if he had somehow been prevented from revealing this discovery? With each new clue and revelation, the investigation became more complex and full of twists and turns. What had once seemed like a simple case of disappearance in the wilderness now turned into a mystery that involved not only the mountain itself, but also the secrets it held and the people who might have something to hide. The Matterhorn, with its relentless storms and treacherous terrain, had become the stage for a drama far greater than anyone had imagined, and the answer was now further away than ever. The climber's secret, if it existed, still lay hidden deep, within the mountain, waiting to be uncovered. After years of mystery and an endless search, the climax of the investigation into the Matterhorn climber's disappearance came with palpable tension. The new expedition, better equipped than ever, set out with a clear objective: to discover what really happened and reveal the mountain's secret. The mountain, with its silent and treacherous immensity, seemed poised to reveal its truth. But, as always, it did not yield easily. The unforgiving conditions, with sudden storms and biting winds, had already tested the team's resolve, even before they reached the area where the remains had been found.
Yet, there was a sense that something big was about to happen. As the expedition progressed, the atmosphere grew more charged, as if the mountain were watching every move. The frigid air cut like knives, and vision was blurred by the heavy snow.
But something seemed unusual about the landscape. Suddenly, during the descent to the critical area, a team member, while maneuvering the equipment, felt something solid beneath his feet. As he fell, he instinctively grabbed for something that felt strange. When he got up and began digging, the discovery was a shock. The snow gave way, revealing something more than just rocks or more layers of ice. It was a clearly artificial object, long buried, but visible enough to be identified. The expedition immediately organized to excavate around the object, and what appeared to be a simple geological formation turned out to be something of great significance. It was a structure partially covered in rock, but with clear signs of human intervention. Furthermore, burn marks and traces of food nearby indicated that someone, likely the climber, had attempted to survive there. With each layer of ice removed, more traces of survival were discovered. Ropes, pieces of climbing equipment, and fragments of a tent that were far from mere traces of an accident. It was as if he had settled there in a desperate attempt to resist the unforgiving environment and the solitude of the mountain. The discovery was a turning point. Until then, it was believed that the climber had disappeared without a trace, a victim of the elements and the mountain's violence. But now, with this new evidence, the theory that he had made an extraordinary discovery began to take hold. He might have found something, and this would explain his persistence in surviving for so long, even in such adverse conditions. His behavior of trying to build a shelter, searching for food, and enduring the extreme conditions in such an organized manner was a clear indication that he had a greater purpose, something that could hold the key to understanding his journey and his destiny. He wasn't just trying to survive, he was also searching for something. The team of investigators quickly began reviewing all the new clues. The terrain, the structure found, and the food traces, which indicated an attempt to adapt to the hostile environment, were meticulously analyzed. The question on everyone's face was, what did he find? One of the strongest theories to emerge was that the climber had made an extraordinary geological discovery, or even more intriguing, had found something beyond common scientific understanding. The improvised structure could be a starting point for a theory suggesting he had found a rare mineral formation or an unidentified natural phenomenon, something he believed to be so important that he decided to continue his expedition, despite knowing the risks. As the excavation progressed, team members began to discuss what this meant for future investigations. Geological records from the region indicated that the area around the peak where the climber disappeared was known for unusual geological features. If he was truly searching for a scientific discovery, he might have found a rare fault line, or even a very ancient ice formation, something that could rewrite the geological understanding of the mountain and the region. But for many, a crucial question remained. Had he discovered something greater than a simple scientific curiosity? Was the mountain protecting something even more valuable, something the climber refused to abandon, even when his survival seemed impossible? As the final excavations progressed, the mystery deepened. Drone footage revealed details that suggested human interference in an area previously thought to be purely natural. The idea that the climber had found something important before disappearing no longer seemed a distant possibility, but a possible reality. This elevated the mystery to a new level. How long had he survived after the discovery? And why hadn't he left a clear record of what he found? with each new clue. The feeling that a shocking revelation was imminent gripped the team, but at the same time, tensions rose. The risk of new unexpected discoveries seemed imminent, and each member of the expedition began to question whether they were truly ready for what was to come. The mountain, with its silent secrets, seemed to resist the truth, as if to test the endurance of all who dared to unravel its mysteries. Finally, as the storm intensified and the expedition neared its limit, the team members faced a critical choice: continue their search or retreat and preserve what they had already discovered. They knew they were very close to the answer, but would what they would find truly be worth it? Or would the cost of discovery be something they could not bear? The climax was about to happen, and the moment of truth was fast approaching. But how would the mountain behave now? Was it finally ready to reveal all its secrets? The climber's fate and the true mystery he had sought to unravel were on the verge of being unearthed. But the risk of losing more lives in the search for the truth was increasingly palpable. After years of searching, the time has finally come to uncover the truth about the fate of the lost Matterhorn climber. Recent discoveries made with drones and excavations have revealed more than just traces. The makeshift shelter structure he had set up, alongside climbing gear and food traces, indicated he had been trying to survive for much longer than previously thought. However, the biggest revelation was yet to come. The excavation uncovered an inscription on the rocks indicating the climber had made an extraordinary discovery before disappearing. This inscription suggested he was searching for something much greater than a simple mountain conquest. He was searching for a geological secret that could rewrite the history of the Matterhorn. For the researchers, the answer was clear. The climber had found something important, something that had kept him alive for so long, despite the extreme conditions. But the truth, while bringing a sense of justice, was also painful. The climber, who had disappeared without a trace, had not succumbed to the mountain, but rather made a discovery that, for some reason, he was unable to share with the world. His death was not just a mountain tragedy, but the end of a search that could have altered our understanding of the mountain's geology and history. The discovery was the answer, but it brought to light the pain of what could have been had he had more time to reveal the secret he had found. As justice was served, the climber became a symbol not only of courage, but of sacrifice. His journey was not in vain, but the costs were higher than anyone imagined. The mountain, which had been his greatest adversary, now held not only the traces of his quest, but also the secrets he had found. The mystery was solved, but as always with the Matterhorn, the truth, even unearthed, still retained its complexity, challenging those who ventured to seek it. The outcome of the Matterhorn climber's story brought a mixture of relief and pain to his wife. Finally, the truth was revealed, but the sense of peace she had hoped for was mixed with sadness. He had survived much longer than she imagined, but he never had the chance to share his great discovery. The pain of his loss was amplified by the realization that he was close to something significant. This discovery, which could have changed, the understanding of the mountain, died with him, leaving a void difficult to fill. For the researchers, the conclusion was equally bitter. The mystery was revealed, but the price was high. The climber became more than a victim of the treacherous terrain. He became a symbol of resilience and courage, someone who defied death in search of a greater secret. Justice was served, but the feeling that the cost was irreparable weighed heavily on everyone. Despite this, the climber's memory was marked by his tenacity. He not only faced the mountain, but also challenged the limits of what was considered possible in terms of survival. His quest, though tragically cut short, became a legacy of courage and determination. The Matterhorn, with all its secrets, now symbolized not only natural mysteries, but also human strength in the face of the imponderable.